I had just sold my company Biofreight Industries for $52 million. To celebrate, I invited my only daughter Sandra and her husband Brian Walsh to Canlis, the most exclusive restaurant in Seattle. When I left the table to take a call confirming the wire transfer, a young waiter blocked my path. He was terrified. "Mr. Sterling," he whispered urgently, "don't drink your wine. I just saw your daughter put something in your glass." My heart stopped. I stayed calm, walked back to the table, pretended to knock over a water glass, and in the confusion I switched my glass with Sandra's. 10 minutes later, everything changed. Before I reveal what Sandra put in that wine glass, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. The champagne was still bubbling in my glass when everything I thought I knew about my family shattered. My name is Zavian Sterling. I'm 68 years old, and I just sold my company Biofreight Industries for $52 million. After 30 years of building a business from nothing, I thought I deserved to celebrate with the two people who mattered most, my daughter Sandra and her husband Brian Walsh. That Sunday evening at Canlis should have been perfect. Instead, it became the night I discovered my own family was trying to destroy me. "Dad, you're a legend." Brian raised his wine glass, his practiced smile wide. 30 years of hard work, and now you're finally getting what you deserve. Sandra nodded, but I noticed her hands trembling as she reached for her wine. "We're so proud of you, Daddy." My phone buzzed. First National Bank. "I need to take this," I said, standing. Final wire confirmation. The call was brief, but life-changing. "Mr. Sterling, the $52 million has cleared. Congratulations, sir." As I hung up and turned to return to our table, a young waiter blocked my path. His name tag read Blake Anderson, and his hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped his tray. "Mr. Sterling," he whispered, terror in his eyes, "I'm sorry to bother you, but I have to tell you something. I'd spent decades reading people. This kid wasn't lying." "What is it, Blake?" "Sir, I was refilling water behind your table. Your son-in-law pointed to that painting and asked your daughter a loud question about the artist. It felt staged, like he was making sure you were looking away." My heart stopped. The moment you both looked away, your daughter moved fast. She took a small brown vial from her purse, unscrewed the cap, and dumped white powder into your wine glass. Then she put the vial back. It took 3 seconds. "My own daughter, my Sandra. Are you absolutely certain?" Blake nodded. "Yes, sir, 100%. That's why I had to stop you." I pulled out $500 and pressed it into his hand. "Blake, you just saved my life." I walked back to the table, my mind racing. The wine glasses sat exactly where I'd left them. Sandra was laughing nervously at Brian's story, but her eyes kept darting to my untouched wine. "Everything okay, Dad?" Sandra asked. "Just business," I said, settling into my chair. I needed to switch the glasses, but I had to be smart about it. When our waiter approached to refill water, I made my move. As he reached across the table, I accidentally jerked my elbow, connecting with Brian's full glass. "Oh, goodness!" I exclaimed as ice water flooded the tablecloth. "Jesus, Zavian," Brian snapped. "Perfect chaos," Sandra gasped. Brian cursed. The waiter rushed in with napkins. In those 5 seconds of confusion, my hands moved with precision. Right hand picked up my tainted glass. Left hand picked up Sandra's clean glass. When I set them back down, they had traded places. "I'm so sorry," I said, dabbing the table. "I guess my age is catching up with me." Brian forced a smile, sharing a knowing look with Sandra. They thought my clumsiness was the first sign of confusion. They thought their plan was working. They had no idea. I raised my glass, Sandra's original clean glass. "Despite my clumsiness, let's toast. To family and to getting exactly what you deserve." "To family?" Sandra echoed, lifting my original glass, the one containing the powder meant to destroy my mind. She took a large, confident sip. The next 10 minutes crawled by. I watched Sandra carefully while pretending to eat. It started subtly. She blinked hard, pressing her hand to her temple. "Brian," she murmured, "the lights seem very bright." "It's Canlis, darling. Everything's bright here." "No," Sandra said, her voice thickening. "I feel dizzy." Brian's confidence cracked. "Sandra, you've had 1 glass of wine." "I'm not playing." She tried to stand, gripping the table. "The room is spinning." Her eyes rolled back. She slumped sideways into her chair, her body going limp. Her arms began twitching in small spasms. Brian stared in shock, his face draining of color. He wasn't moving to help her. He was frozen, watching his perfect plan collapse. "Call 911, I shouted, grabbing Sandra's wrist to check her pulse. "My daughter's having some kind of seizure." 10 minutes later, Sandra's fork clattered to her plate. "I don't feel right," she whispered. That was Sunday night, and it was just the beginning. The ambulance sirens cut through Seattle's Sunday night rain as my daughter convulsed in the back seat. Brian paced the small space like a caged animal, his earlier confidence replaced by something that looked like panic. What did she eat tonight? The paramedic asked. Scallops, Brian answered immediately. She's allergic to shellfish. I said nothing. Sandra wasn't allergic to anything. Dr. Maria Rodriguez met us at Seattle General's emergency bay, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. What do we have? 28-year-old female sudden neurological symptoms. Husband says allergic reaction. Brian stepped forward, charm switching on. Doctor, my wife has severe shellfish allergies. She just needs an EpiPen shot. Dr. Rodriguez lifted Sandra's eyelids, checking her pupils. Pupils constricted, not dilated. Respiratory depression, not anaphylaxis. This isn't allergic reaction. It has to be, Brian insisted. I'm her husband. I know what I'm talking about. Dr. Rodriguez was already moving. Full talk screen, CBC saline drip, Narcan just in case. They wheeled Sandra into Trauma Bay 3. Brian tried to follow. Sir, wait outside while we work. But she's my wife, and I'm her doctor. An hour of fluorescent-lit waiting room hell. Brian couldn't sit still, constantly checking his phone, muttering under his breath. Dr. Rodriguez finally emerged, looking directly at me, not Brian. Mr. Sterling, your daughter, has significant olanzapine in her system. What? Brian stammered. Olanzapine, a powerful antipsychotic medication. At these levels, it causes exactly her symptoms. Your wife has been poisoned. Brian went white. That's impossible. Maybe she took something by mistake. She's been stressed, mixed up her medications. What medications does she take? Brian froze. Anxiety medication, for anxiety. What's the name? I don't remember. Dr. Rodriguez stared at him. Mr. Walsh, olanzapine treats schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. A dose this high could have killed her. I'm required to report suspected poisonings to police. No. Brian's voice cracked. No police. This is family matter. Just treat her. Your wife will be in ICU for 48 hours. She's lucky to be alive. Dr. Rodriguez walked away. Brian stood shaking in the hallway. 5 minutes later, I followed him to the vending machines. He was on his phone, voice desperate. Brooks, it's me. The plan is falling apart. She drank it. Sandra drank it instead of him. He paused, listening. I don't know how the old man must have. It doesn't matter. They know it's olanzapine. They're talking police reports. Another pause. The hearing is tomorrow morning at 10. How do we get conservatorship over him if he's fine and she's in the psych ward? My heart hammered against my ribs. No, you listen. You're in this as deep as I am. Your gambling debts aren't my problem. You were paid to handle the medical side, so handle it. Brian hung up, breathing hard. When he turned, he saw me. Dad, he said, voice shifting to fake concern. There you are. I was just calling my brother. But I'd heard everything. The conspiracy, the conservatorship, the gambling debts. After hearing that conspiracy call, I knew I had to protect myself. I told Brian I needed air and stepped outside, but instead of going home to grieve, I made a decision that would change everything. At 2 a.m. after leaving the hospital, I used the spare keys Sandra forgot I had and broke into my own daughter's house. The Bellevue mansion sat dark and empty while they maintained their hospital vigil. I knew exactly where to go, Sandra's home office. The spare key was under the ceramic planter by the back door, exactly where it had been for 3 years. I slipped inside, using my phone's flashlight to navigate to her office. Her laptop sat open on the desk, still logged in. Sloppy security for someone planning a federal crime. I searched her email for Brooks, the name Brian had whispered at the hospital. The results made my blood run cold. An entire email chain titled Sterling Contingency filled the screen. Messages between Sandra Bryan and Dr. Kenneth Brooks. From Bryan to Dr. Brooks, he's suspicious about shipping manifests. The biofreight sale is disaster for us. We need to accelerate timeline. From Dr. Brooks to Bryan, forced psychiatric commitment requires precipitating event. He needs to be confused. I've prescribed olanzapine under false name. Dosage will induce acute psychosis within 20 minutes. From Sandra to both, I can do it at celebration dinner. He trusts me completely. Once hospitalized, Brooks handles medical certification. Bryan files emergency petition Tuesday morning. We must control assets before federal audit begins. Federal audit. The words hit like a physical blow. I kept reading pieces falling into place. Bryan hadn't just been asking casual questions about Biofreight's shipping operations. He'd been using my company's legitimate transport network to smuggle illegal goods. The $52 million sale wasn't his payday. It was his death sentence. Corporate acquisitions triggered mandatory federal audits, complete reviews of every shipping manifest for 5 years. Brian knew the audit would expose his smuggling. He couldn't stop the sale, but he could run from consequences. Drug me into apparent dementia, have his paid doctor certify. Incompetence. Gain legal control through emergency conservatorship, then disappear with my money before FBI came knocking. I found the final evidence in Sandra's downloads, emergency petition for conservatorship Zavian Sterling. Petitioner Brian Walsh seeks emergency conservatorship over Zavian Sterling, age 68, due to rapid onset dementia, paranoia, financial irresponsibility. Supporting testimony by Dr. Kenneth Brooks, Mr. Sterling's primary physician who will attest to deteriorating mental condition. Tuesday, 10 a.m. King County Superior Court, 30 hours away. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed I was just a confused old man who'd stumble into their trap. They'd forgotten I'd spent 30 years outmaneuvering competitors and corporate sharks. They'd forgotten I was still the CEO who built BioFreight from nothing. I copied every email to flash drive, photographed the petition, and closed the laptop. As I prepared to leave, I noticed one more detail that made me smile grimly. Brian's import business shared the same offshore banking as Dr. Brooks's gambling accounts. The doctor wasn't just co-conspirator. He was Brian's victim, a puppet, dancing to avoid financial ruin. I locked the house and drove home through pre-dawn darkness. The first hints of morning light crept over the Cascade Mountains. In 30 hours, they planned to strip away everything I'd built. But I had evidence now, emails, banking records. Their entire conspiracy laid bare. The hearing was set for Tuesday, 10 a.m. in 30 hours. I had one chance to destroy them. Michael Crawford answered his phone on the first ring. "Zavian, this better be life or death." "It is," I said. I'd known Crawford for 15 years, ever since he'd handled BioFreight's first major contract dispute. He was the kind of lawyer other lawyers feared, the man who turned corporate boardroom negotiations into bloodbaths and walked away smiling. "I need you at your office. Not this morning. Right now." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Crawford's downtown Seattle office occupied the 42nd floor of Columbia Center, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. At 8:30 a.m. the building was nearly empty, but his corner office blazed with light. He was already brewing coffee when I arrived, still in yesterday's clothes, but sharp as a razor. "Talk to me," he said, settling behind his massive mahogany desk. For the next hour I laid out everything. The poisoning attempt, Sandra's collapse, the hospital discovery, the emails I'd found, the conservatorship petition, Brian's smuggling operation using BioFreight's shipping network. Crawford listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "Jesus, Zavian, your own daughter." "She's not the mastermind," I said. "Brian is, but she made her choice." Crawford stood and walked to his wall of law books, pulling down a thick volume on emergency conservatorship procedures. "Here's what they're counting on," he said, flipping pages. "Emergency hearings are rubber stamps. Judge sees a missing old man, hears testimony from a doctor, signs the order. Takes 15 minutes. But I'm not missing. Exactly, which means we don't just defend. We attack." He picked up his phone and hit speed dial. "Peterson, it's Crawford. I need a full background workup on a Dr. Kenneth Brooks. I want everything. Bank records, debts, medical board complaints, parking tickets. I needed it yesterday." He hung up and looked at me. "My private investigator. If there's dirt on this doctor, Peterson will find it." The call came back 2 hours later. Crawford put it on speaker. "Boss, this Brooks guy is in deep. 300,000 in gambling debts to an offshore sports book. But here's the kicker. The parent company of that book, it's registered to a shell corporation called Walsh International Trading." Crawford and I exchanged glances. "Brian doesn't just own Brooks' debt," Crawford said slowly. "He is the debt. The doctor isn't a conspirator, Zavian. He's a victim. A puppet dancing to avoid financial ruin. The pieces clicked into place. Brian had deliberately gotten Dr. Brooks into debt, then offered him a way out. Provide false medical testimony, help with the conservatorship, and the debt disappears. Refuse and face bankruptcy and professional ruin. That's our angle." Crawford said, his eyes lighting up with predatory satisfaction. "Brooks isn't a criminal mastermind. He's a desperate man being blackmailed. When we put him on that witness stand tomorrow, he'll break like a twig." Crawford made another call, this one to someone he called Sarah, at the FBI's white-collar crime division. "Sarah, it's Mike Crawford. I need a favor. I've got a federal smuggling case that's about to break wide open, and I need agents standing by for arrests. He gave her the basics. BioFreight's compromised shipping network. Brian's illegal imports. The timing with the corporate acquisition audit. They'll be there, he said after hanging up. Courtroom observers ready to move when Brooks confesses. By 6 p.m. we had our battle plan. Let Brian walk into court confident and arrogant. Let him present his perjured testimony. Let Dr. Brooks take the stand and lie under oath. Then destroy them both with evidence, cross-examination, and federal charges. There's one more thing, I said as we prepared to leave. Brian's going to call me tomorrow morning. He thinks I'm a confused old man wandering the streets. He'll try to get me to come home so Brooks can examine me. Crawford smiled coldly. Then you'd better give him the performance of your life? Monday evening we had our battle plan. All we needed was for Brian to walk into our trap. I answered Brian's call with a trembling voice I'd practiced all night. Brian, oh God, is Sandra. Okay. Crawford sat across from his desk watching me perform on speakerphone, his eyes gleaming with professional appreciation. Dad, thank God. Brian's voice carried false concern. I've been calling everywhere. Where are you? I let my voice crack perfectly. I'm at that diner on Pine Street. I couldn't stay in the house. Everything reminds me of Sandra, and I can't think straight. Dad listened carefully. I spoke with Sandra's real doctor, Dr. Kenneth Brooks. He's been treating her for months. Here came the medical gaslighting. Treating her for what? She has a mental health condition, and Dr. Brooks is worried about you, too. Based on your behavior lately, the forgetfulness, the confusion, he thinks what happened to Sandra might be genetic. Crawford raised his eyebrows, impressed by Brian's audacity. I don't understand, I said, voice shaking. I feel fine. Dad, that's exactly what Dr. Brooks said you'd say. He's on his way to your house right now to check on you. Just go home and let him examine you. A doctor at my house, but I don't need a doctor. Dad, you're not making sense. You left the hospital without telling anyone you sound confused and scared. This is exactly what Dr. Brooks warned me about. I gave him my masterpiece, a long shuddering sob. Oh God, maybe you're right. Maybe something is wrong with me. I can't think clearly. It's okay, Dad. Just go home. Dr. Brooks will be there in 20 minutes. Okay, I whispered, defeated. Help me. I need help. I hung up and looked at Crawford. He was grinning like a shark. Oscar worthy, he said. Now Dr. Brooks drives to my empty house and rings the doorbell for 30 minutes while we head to court. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. Dr. Brooks is at your house. Where are you? I showed Crawford. He's panicking. Good, panic makes people sloppy. At 8:45, Brian called again, voice tight with fear. Dad, Dr. Brooks has been ringing your doorbell for 15 minutes. Your car isn't there. Where are you? I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was Brian's strained voice. Dad, this is exactly the behavior Dr. Brooks was talking about. You're confused, lost, might be in danger. Please call back. Crawford and I listened twice. He thinks he's won? Crawford said. Missing father-in-law medical expert ready to testify emergency hearing in an hour. From his perspective, this couldn't be better. That's what makes this beautiful, I said, straightening my tie. He thinks I'm a confused old man wandering Seattle. He has no idea I've been 3 steps ahead since Sunday night. We organized our evidence quickly. Email printouts, financial records, the conservatorship petition, the olanzapine vial from Sandra's purse, now in an evidence bag. At 9:58 a.m., Crawford and I stood outside courtroom 3B listening to Brian lie to Judge Miller about my disappearance. Through the window, I could see him gesturing dramatically, his lawyer nodding along. Dr. Brooks sat in the front row looking like he wanted to disappear. He's telling the judge about the missing person report, Crawford whispered, how you're suffering from rapid onset dementia and pose a danger to yourself and your $52 million. I straightened my shoulders and adjusted my cufflinks. 3 hours of deception had led to this moment. Time to make our entrance. 3 hours of deception had led to this moment. Time to make our entrance. The courtroom door swung open with a bang that silenced every voice in the room. I apologize for our tardiness. Your Honor, Crawford's voice boomed. Michael Crawford, representing Mr. Zavian Sterling, who I believe has been the subject of some misunderstanding. I stepped in behind Crawford, wearing my best suit, sharp as steel. Not confused, not missing, not the broken old man they'd described. Brian's face went through a remarkable transformation. Confusion, recognition, then sickly pallor as reality hit. His perfect plan was collapsing. Mr. Cooper, Judge Miller said, You told this court your client's father-in-law was missing. He appears very much present. Bradley Cooper's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. Your Honor, we were told he was missing. We filed a police report. Well, he's here now. Perhaps we can proceed with facts rather than speculation. Dr. Brooks sat in the witness chair, pale and sweating, having just testified about my supposed dementia. Dr. Brooks, Judge Miller continued, you were saying Mr. Sterling is incompetent? Yes, Your Honor. Based on my examinations, he exhibits severe cognitive decline. Crawford stood smoothly. Your Honor, I have questions for Dr. Brooks. Proceed. Crawford approached like a predator. Dr. Brooks, when was your last examination of Mr. Sterling? This morning. I went to his home. Interesting. Because this morning Mr. Sterling was in my office preparing for this hearing. So when exactly did you examine him? Brooks flushed. I must have yesterday. Crawford pulled out a thick folder. Dr. Brooks, are you familiar with Riverside Casino in Tacoma? Brooks flinched. I don't see the relevance. It's relevant because you owe them $300,000. Debts now owned by Mr. Walsh's Shell Corporation. The courtroom erupted. Judge Miller banged his gavel. This witness has been financially compromised. Crawford continued. He's not providing medical testimony. He's performing to pay debts. Doctor, isn't it true Mr. Walsh offered to forgive your gambling debts for false testimony about Mr. Sterling's mental state? Brooks was shaking, sweating. I can't. Isn't it true you prescribed olanzapine under a false name for Mr. Walsh to use against Mr. Sterling? I didn't know what he was going to do with it. The words exploded out like a dam bursting. Judge Miller leaned forward, thunderous. What did you just say, Doctor? Then it all poured out. The gambling debts, Brian's blackmail, the false prescription, the drugging plan. He owned my debts. He forced me to lie. The old man was never confused. It was all Brian's plan. He was going to take $52 million and disappear before the federal audit exposed his smuggling. Chaos erupted. Judge Miller banged his gavel repeatedly. Bradley Cooper frantically shuffled papers. And Brian stared at me with pure hatred. The charming mask was gone. The loving son-in-law act was over. Only the cornered predator remained. Brian erupted from his chair like a man possessed, lunging toward me with murder in his eyes. Brian's hands were inches from my throat when Agent Torres tackled him to the ground. Two men in dark suits materialized from the gallery, moving with federal precision. One had Brian face down on the floor, the other stood over them. Federal agents, Agent Torres announced, showing his badge to Judge Miller. We've been observing these proceedings. Judge Miller banged his gavel. What's going on here? Agent Torres hauled Brian to his feet, handcuffs clicking. Brian Walsh, you're under arrest for federal smuggling conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted assault on a federal witness. Federal witness, Judge Miller looked confused. Crawford stepped forward. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling's company has been unknowingly used for Mr. Walsh's smuggling operation. The $52 million sale triggered a federal audit that would expose these crimes. Agent Torres continued. For 2 years, Mr. Walsh used Biofreight's pharmaceutical shipping network to smuggle illegal goods. Medical containers expedited customs clearance. Perfect cover. Brian's charming mask was gone. Only a cornered animal remained. The conservatorship scheme was his escape plan, Agent Torres explained. Gain control of Mr. Sterling's assets, liquidate everything before the audit disappear with $52 million. Agent Torres's partner approached Dr. Brooks with handcuffs. Dr. Kenneth Brooks, you're under arrest for conspiracy medical malpractice and filing false reports. I didn't want to do it, Brooks wailed. He owned my gambling debts. Bradley Cooper sat stunned. His career was over. Your Honor, Crawford said, I move to dismiss the conservatorship petition. Granted, Judge Miller said immediately. Mr. Sterling is clearly competent. This proceeding was based on perjured testimony. Brian was being led away, but turned back, hatred burning in his eyes. You think you've won, old man. You have no idea what you've cost me, what you've cost your precious daughter. Agent Torres yanked him forward. Save it for your lawyer, Walsh. As they dragged Brian through the doors, his threats echoed down the hallway. Judge Miller addressed the courtroom. This court stands adjourned. Mr. Sterling, you're free to go. I apologize for this ordeal. Crawford shook my hand. Congratulations, Zavian. Justice served. But watching FBI agents escort Dr. Brooks out, I felt no satisfaction, only bone-weary exhaustion. Brian was going to federal prison. Dr. Brooks would lose his license. The conspiracy was destroyed. But Sandra was still in that hospital bed, still my daughter, still the woman who had tried to poison her own father for money. As they dragged Brian away, I realized there was one more confrontation I needed with my daughter. Sandra was awake when I entered her hospital room, staring at the news coverage of her husband's arrest. The TV showed Brian in handcuffs being led from the courthouse, Agent Torres beside him. The news anchor was explaining the federal smuggling charges, the conservatorship fraud, the $52 million scheme. Sandra looked up when she heard my footsteps. Her eyes were red, but I couldn't tell if from tears or medication. "Daddy?" She whispered, her voice small and broken. "I saw the news. They arrested Brian. They're saying terrible things about him." I pulled the visitor's chair close to her bed and sat down. The security guard outside her door was a reminder that she was still under psychiatric hold. "They're not saying terrible things, Sandra. They're stating facts." She tried to sit up straighter, wincing from the IV in her arm. "Daddy, you have to understand. I didn't know about the smuggling. I didn't know about any of that. Brian told me you were getting confused, that you might lose the money. He said we were protecting you. The lies came so easily, even now, even after everything she was trying to manipulate me." I reached into my jacket and pulled out printed copies of the emails I'd found on her laptop. "Sandra, I have every email you sent to Brian and Dr. Brooks. I know about the Sterling contingency. I know you researched olanzapine dosages. I know you practiced the timing." Her face crumpled as she recognized the evidence. The performance was over. I know you weren't some innocent victim, Sandra. You were an active participant. You held the vial. You poured the powder into my wine. You tried to destroy your own father's mind for money." She started crying, then real tears this time, ugly, desperate sobs that shook her whole body. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry, Daddy. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know how I became this person." "I do," I said quietly. "You married a predator, and he taught you to be one too." I stood up and walked to the window. Seattle's afternoon skyline stretched out below us, the same view I'd had from countless hospital rooms over the years, when Sandra was born. When she broke her arm at 8, when my wife was dying. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, not turning around. "The $52 million is going into a trust, my trust. I'm the sole administrator. You won't see a penny of it. But Daddy, you won't have an allowance. You won't have a credit card. You won't have a car payment. For the first time in your adult life, Sandra, you're going to be poor." I turned back to face her. "When you're released from here, you're going to work, minimum wage. You're going to learn what it means to earn your own money, to pay your own bills, to survive without Daddy's checkbook. How will I live? Where will I go? I've arranged a job for you, community service work. You'll be helping people who have nothing, people who've lost everything. Maybe they'll teach you something about gratitude and humility." Sandra was staring at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the father who'd enabled her for 35 years was gone forever. "The lawyers tell me you probably won't go to prison. You'll get probation, community service, mandatory counseling. But Sandra, understand this clearly. You're not my little girl anymore. You're a woman who tried to poison her father. You chose money over family." I walked toward the door, then stopped. "There's one more thing. If you want any chance of redemption, any possibility of being my daughter again someday, you'll have to earn it. Not with words or tears or manipulation, with actions, with years of proving you've changed." She was sobbing again, reaching toward me. "Daddy, please, I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. You chose money over family, Sandra. Now you'll learn what it means to earn both." I left her there crying in that sterile hospital room. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was necessary. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen reading Blake's first report as my financial manager. Blake Anderson looked nothing like the terrified waiter who had saved my life. He wore a $2,000 suit and carried himself with executive confidence. "Mr. Sterling," he said, settling at my kitchen table, "the foundation is exceeding projections. The Sterling Foundation. Blake's idea. Take part of the $52 million and help people who'd lost everything like Sandra was learning to do. The shelter reports are encouraging," Blake continued. "Sandra completed her first month without incidents. Her supervisor says she's thorough, punctual, surprisingly good with residents. I poured coffee from the same pot I'd used for 20 years. Some things didn't need changing. How is she really?" Blake's expression softened. "Different, sir, quieter, humbler. First week was rough, crying, complaining, but something shifted when she met Maria, the single mother living in her car, or Tom, the veteran who lost his house to medical bills. Sometimes you had to lose everything to understand what mattered. She asked about you last week, wanted to know if you were well happy. I told her you were at peace. And I was. Brian was serving 15 years in federal prison. The smuggling network was dismantled. Dr. Brooks lost his license and got 3 years. Justice had worked. But more than that, I'd learned the difference between being successful and being wise, between having money and having wealth. Sandra started a savings account, Blake said. $20 from each paycheck. She wants to take business classes, learn to manage money properly. Says she never wants to be dependent on anyone again. I walked to the window, looking at Seattle's skyline. Same view for 30 years, but somehow it looked different. Cleaner, more hopeful. Blake, what would you tell someone who's lost everything? He thought carefully. Rock bottom is solid foundation to build on. People who truly care won't abandon you when you fall. They'll help you climb back up, but only if you're willing to do the work. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Sandra sent through Blake. Dad, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm trying to become someone you could be proud of again. I love you. Always have, even when I forgot how to show it. I stared at that message for a long time, then typed back through Blake. Love isn't enough, Sandra, but it's a start. Keep working, keep growing, we'll see. I realize that true wealth isn't what you accumulate. It's what you protect and who you lift up. It's the Blake Andersons who take chances and run with them. It's second chances even when undeserved. It's strength to set boundaries and wisdom to leave doors unlocked for redemption. Brian chose greed and lost everything. Sandra chose money over family and learned the hard way what both really cost. Blake chose courage in a single moment and built a new life from it. As for me, I chose justice over revenge, accountability over enabling, and hope over bitterness. Sometimes the people closest to you can become strangers, but justice and genuine love can guide them back home. What would you have done in my place? Looking back on this true story, I realize I made a critical mistake that nearly cost me everything. I was so focused on building wealth that I forgot to build wisdom in my own family. Don't be like me. Don't wait until someone tries to poison you to recognize the warning signs. The hardest lesson from this grandpa story's experience. Money doesn't corrupt people. It reveals who they already are. Sandra didn't become greedy overnight. The signs were there for years, but I chose to enable rather than educate, to give rather than guide. If you're a parent or grandparent watching this true story, please learn from my mistakes. Set boundaries early. Teach the value of earning, not just receiving. When someone shows you their character, believe them the first time. My late wife tried to warn me, but I was too proud to listen. God has a way of protecting us even when we can't protect ourselves. That young waiter Blake wasn't just in the right place at the right time. He was an angel in disguise, sent to save not just my life, but my legacy. The most painful truth I learned. Sometimes loving someone means letting them face consequences. Enabling isn't love, it's fear disguised as compassion. Real love sets boundaries and demands growth. These grandpa stories aren't just entertainment, they're warnings. Watch for the red flags. Trust your instincts. Don't let blood relations blind you to dangerous behavior. As I sit here today, I'm grateful for the betrayal that opened my eyes. It cost me a relationship with my daughter, but it saved my soul and gave Blake a future he deserved. Family isn't just about blood, it's about loyalty, integrity, and genuine love. What warning signs have you ignored in your own family? Share this true story if it resonated with you. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life lessons that could save your family from the same heartbreak I endured.